Hello, Krista. Today I wanted to start my video with a little thought experiment, and in doing it I'm gonna kind of pick on Protestants. Hello, Protestants. I'm sorry, I don't think that you're actually responsible for the things involved in the thought experiment. It's just a thought experiment. I only chose you as a demographic because you're most of America. And a final note before I get started, this video is going to talk about violence, violent crime, and murder. I'm not going to go into graphic detail, but I am going to mention those things repeatedly, so do whatever you need to do to take care of yourself, okay? So the thought experiment. Imagine that most of the crime in America was committed by Protestants. Not just most, but a huge majority. Protestants are about 50% of the population. Imagine that they committed 90% of the murders and like 70 to 80% of the violent crime. How do you think the public would respond to that? Especially the non-Protestant public. I imagine that there would be a certain amount of backlash. And there would probably be some unjustified hateful things said about all Protestants, right? But that's not fair. It would be fair under those circumstances to ask some important questions, like what is it about how our society treats Protestants or interacts with Protestants that's leading them to this kind of violence? What is it about Protestantism that might be contributing to this problem? What are Protestant parents teaching their children about violence? Moreover, I think it would be fair to expect leaders of Protestant organizations and other prominent Protestant people in positions of power to consider these aspects of Protestantism to be problematic. They were doing nothing to address these problems among their friends, in their congregations, and other organizations. That would be reinforcing the violent culture that predominated in Protestantism, and that would be unacceptable. I think it would be fair for the press to even be open in their contempt of such behavior. And because we live in America, I imagine there are some Protestant leaders that would blame minority religions. They would say that they provoked these responses of violence in the Protestants. There are also probably some white Protestant leaders that would try and scapegoat Protestants of color, saying that Protestant thug culture in the inner city was responsible for skewing the numbers, even though that is demonstrably false. How do I know that's false? Because this is my thought experiment. They are unduly scapegoating Protestants of color in a way that reinforces racism and fails to address the violence that has become endemic in the Protestant community. I think it would be fair under those circumstances to be critical and suspicious of the organizations that those Protestants led. I think it would be fair to just reject outright the authority of that sort of Protestant, the sort of Protestant that scapegoats people and fails to address the culture of violence. In fact, I would go so far as to say that those Protestants would be to a degree responsible for the violence in their community, even if they were not committing the violence themselves, because of the culture of violence they are reinforcing. But that's my take on the issue. Okay, so some of you have probably spotted where I'm going with this. Men represent about 50% of the population of the United States, and are responsible for about 90% of the murders, and most of the violent crime as well. What is wrong with masculinity in America? Is there something inherent in American masculinity that might be contributing to this problem? What are fathers teaching their sons about violence? In asking these questions, I am not trying to attack men, but I do think of this violence as a men's problem, and I think men need to do something to address it. And yes, that means that every male politician, prominent man in society, every leader of a men's organization that fails to address this issue is responsible or at least complicit in this culture of violence. We need to start thinking of this as a problem, and not a problem with women or a problem with men of color, but a problem with manhood and masculinity in America, because it is toxic and it is hurting people. And all of us, especially men, need to do something to change it. Krista, I will see you tomorrow.